Okay, we're going to move into a discussion now on supportive housing. And in the past, I was always under the impression that supportive housing was really only appropriate for someone with a really high level of independence who could live on their own with minimal supports. And the model is great for those individuals. But as I've learned from hearing all the presenters from Corporation for Supportive Housing, it's also appropriate for those with other needs as well. So I'm excited to share this presentation with you. Julie Nelson is the Senior Program Manager at Corporation for Supportive Housing, and I heard her present last year at the Illinois Statewide Transition Conference, last year being held in Itasca. Her description for me was the best I'd ever heard because it was so clear to me how you could make supportive housing work for someone. And essentially, it's just a separation of services from bricks and mortar. So I'm excited for you to hear about it, and then we're going to follow her up with a real life experience about supportive housing. So please help me welcome Julie Nelson.
Thank you. I'm kind of a wanderer while I talk. I'm also short, so being trapped behind the podium, then no one will ever see me. So thank you for having me out to talk about supportive housing today, and I'm so grateful for everyone that's here. I'm with CSH, Corporation for Supportive Housing, and our work is supported by the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities. The council really wanted everyone in the state of Illinois to know that supportive housing is one option and one choice that folks have. So that's really why I'm here today. And we're going to start out with a video. Just to get us thinking about choice and options and being in control of your own setting. Oh, thank you. And this is by Open Futures Learning. This is their video that they put together.
Hands off, it's my home. Hands off, it's my home. It's my home. Hands off, it's my home. It's my home. I don't have a schedule tacked to my wall. I don't expect to find one anywhere at all. If the telephone is ringing, I pick up to see who calls. I don't have great big posters about slips, trips, and falls. I decide what happens when I go to bed or eat. I decide who enters in, which people I'll greet. I decide on furniture, which bed, which bath, which seat. I decide the temperature and when to turn the heat up. All the things around my house belong to me. I don't have strangers coming in, changing channels on my TV. All the mail I get is opened by the addressee. I have dominion in my castle, have my privacy. I don't use my home for meetings, trainings, or interviews. The colors in my carpets are my favorite chosen cues. All records kept about me are accurate and true. And if I really wanted to, I'd own 100 pairs of shoes. I will make my choices, I'll make my own decisions. And any plan I make contains my own wishes and visions. Any person in my home is here for my permission. No office do I have here, no rules and no restrictions. I decide who to employ to a vacant situation. I decide on where I want to store my medication. I have the right to keep my mother out my accommodation. And I don't need to have a weekly fire evacuation. No risk is set to stop me from trying something new. I make my own mind up about everything I do. When I need support, I'll let you know if it is you. Hands off, it's my home, or Sam Sly and I will sue.
I'm glad everyone loved that video as much as I did the first time I got to see it. So I thought that'd be a great way to just start the conversation today about supportive housing. Again, this is one choice that folks have. And I'm going to start with a little background about CSH. So we're actually a national not-for-profit, Corporation for Supportive Housing, and we shorten it to go by CSH. We have about 15 offices around the country, and we do a variety of things. So we have one kind of part of our organization that does lending for supportive housing projects. So for communities that are looking to build a new building and develop a new property, we have a CDFI, or we are a CDFI, to do lending for that. I am not a banker, so I'm not on that team. but I can always connect folks to those great individuals doing the work at CSH. Then we also have an online training center so that supportive housing providers and providers that want to learn best practices in services and supportive housing can learn about that. And then there's the scope of work that kind of I live in the most, which is we do training, we do technical assistance, and we do policy work with communities and with the state to really look at supportive housing best practices and expanding it to folks who need it. We also talk a lot, you'll hear me talk about this more, but quality supportive housing. So that's something that's going to come up too. And one of the things at CSH that we talk about all the time is wanting to ensure that not only are we creating supportive housing, but it's quality supportive housing. So when the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities first started working with CSH, we wanted to really go back to the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance. And has anybody heard of the Alliance? Well, they're fantastic. So the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance is a statewide organization, and they work with self-advocates around the state of Illinois in groups that are working on advocacy projects and really ensuring that self-advocates are driving the conversation and working on advocacy in their own communities. So this is the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance's position statement. And I'm just going to read it aloud because this is really where we wanted to start from. We want Illinois to create a disability service system where supports and services are controlled by us, the individuals who receive them. We want opportunities, we want freedom, and we want choices. So that's really where we wanted to start with, because historically, supportive housing has not been an option presented to folks. So why am I here? Does this look familiar to anybody? There's like umpteen bazillion different forms. It's a really difficult system to navigate. It's incredibly confusing. Information is siloed. So because of the challenges within our system, we found that we really need to have a lot of ongoing conversations about what supportive housing is, so that if someone's choosing it, that they can advocate and ask for that effectively, and then work towards getting it. So today I'm going to focus on really two things. We're going to talk about what supportive housing is, so that we're all sharing the same language. And then, I think there's a timer on in my presentation, so sorry, I'm going to keep flipping back. And then we're going to learn what to do if this is a choice that you want to make, or if your loved one wants to explore supportive housing. So we're going to think about what we actually mean by quality supportive housing. Supportive housing means we are thinking about and strategically planning for housing that's affordable and housing that has services attached to it. So it's both of these things. Does anyone know anything about affordable housing in Illinois or in the country? Do we have a lot of it, or not? Okay. So, right, there really is nowhere in Illinois that if I am on SSI, I can afford a one-bedroom apartment on my own. That is not what our rents are in this state. It's actually like this in the entire country. So we have an affordable housing crisis across the U.S., and this disproportionately impacts folks with disabilities. Because if I am on a disability income, if I have SSI or SSDI, and I'm working, my income is still not going to be enough to afford market rate housing anywhere. So this is why at CSH we really focus on how to access a subsidy. And a subsidy is how we get that housing to be more affordable. And we're going to talk more about that. The other piece with this is that we have the housing, but we also really need to think about the services, because affordable housing is just that. It's housing I can afford. But with supportive housing, again, we're talking about services. So it's ensuring that services are linked to me so that I have the individualized supports that I need in my own home. and not necessarily limited just to in my home, but so that I'm out in the community, that I'm having the life that I want, going to work, volunteering, being in my faith community, all of those things that all of us do. So supportive housing really separates the housing from the services. And these are the things that make supportive housing what it is. First, you have to have a lease. If I have a guardian, my guardian might be signing that lease, but I still have a lease so that I am controlling the unit. I am living either alone or with someone that I'm choosing. But the key thing with that is that I am in control of who I'm living with. I'm not being matched, I'm not being placed, but I'm choosing who I'm living with, whether it's alone or with a friend, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, spouse. I'm choosing that. Again, it's in a neighborhood like anyone else. It's oftentimes in a building or house that looks like any other building or house in the community. And then again, there's services and collaboration that makes this all work. So some of the benefits, folks can retain control of their income with this model. It's a way to think about an integrated, interdependent life in the community so that I am a part of my neighborhood just like anybody else. So we talked about this a little bit. But again, the individual is going to sign the lease, or their guardian might be signing that lease. You're living there for a long time, and you're in control of who's there with you. And again, this is a place where someone's probably going to be learning new skills as a tenant. Because who here moved into an apartment for the very first time?
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Who here moved into an apartment for the very first time at some point in your life? Like, yeah. So there's always things that we're learning as a new tenant. So this is going to apply as well. I'm going to be learning skills as a tenant. I'm learning about maybe noise issues. I'm working on paying rent. All of those things that come along with being a leaseholder. And getting supports when I need it to make sure that I'm meeting all my lease expectations. So we talked about this a little bit before, but supportive housing also needs to be affordable. There are ways, sometimes a family will purchase a home or a duplex or a two-flat, and that's another way to look at affordability. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that option today. I'm really going to focus on how to access a subsidy. The reason being that subsidies are not easy to get, but they are accessible to everyone. At CSH, we really don't want to, our role is to promote a model that anyone can access, whether maybe their family has resources or not. So we're going to talk about and focus in on the subsidies. So that's why when we're talking about supportive housing, we're looking at a model and the subsidy where you're paying 30% of your income towards your rent. So hopefully someone in the room is better at math than me on a Saturday morning. Let's say I have SSI, so my income's $750 a month. So what is my rent going to be? $225. Thank you. I heard the person in the front, but then I heard other murmurs. So my rent is going to be $225. My subsidy is then going to pay the difference. So that's how that model works. The nice thing about this as well is because it's 30% of my income, maybe my work situation changes. So next year I get a part-time job, my income goes up, my rent will go up. Maybe in another couple years I have a job change, my income is different, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower. But the subsidy, because I'm paying a percent of my income towards my rent, is going to follow my income changes. And this is really important because we want to make sure that it's sustainable in the long term and that folks can truly afford this. You know, nobody wants to be in a position where I'm suddenly paying 60% or 70% of my income towards my rent, because we all know that that is not sustainable. That can't work. Because I still have a phone bill to pay, I need to eat, I need to get around, I need to actually get to work. So we really have to think about all these pieces. So then we talked about this a little bit too. It has to have services. We're going to talk a little bit about the way to think about services because I think everyone here probably knows our state also tends to be kind of siloed when you're thinking about services. So I might be thinking about services from the mental health system. I might be thinking about services from the Division for Developmental Disabilities, or I might be thinking about services from the Division for Rehabilitation Services. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about each one of these ways to think about services. But the main thing to consider is that the services are individualized. So we're going to be, again, thinking about what's in my person-centered plan. And I know everybody heard about that a little bit earlier today. But we're thinking about what are my service needs, what's in my person-centered plan, so it's individualized. So that might mean I need help with activities of daily living, or maybe I need help with paying bills, some social skills. It really is very, again, individualized to what I might need. And if I don't need somebody watching me sleep at night, then I'm not going to be having somebody watching me sleep at night. But the main thing is, again, supportive housing. We're thinking about these services. So it's anybody who needs some extra support. We want to make sure, again, folks are driving their services. So I think you heard about it this morning, the example of someone who wanted to be outside. And so they planned services and did the person-centered planning based around that. So this is the same kind of thing. We're thinking about those person-centered services that are flexible, that are really going to meet what I need. Maybe I want to work with animals. So we're thinking about the services that support me in my job and getting from home to job for those kind of things, or volunteering and walking my neighbor's pets. Another key thing about supportive housing is that we're thinking about the team. So it's not just me as a tenant. I have a team involved. And that team can be my support workers. That team can be my family, my friends, my community. And this is going to be the landlord that's involved in my team. Now, my landlord doesn't need to be involved in the details of my life, right? Like that would not be appropriate. But the landlord is involved with the team because, let's say I am a first-time tenant. And I don't know about you guys, but, you know, there's early birds and then there's late people, right? I am not an early bird. I am on team late night person. I don't know who else here is on team late night. I hear some laughing, so great. I love my late night folks over here. Well, I'm also a gamer. So if I have never lived on my own in an apartment before, I'm a gamer, I love being up late at night. Maybe, and maybe you guys aren't familiar with this, but anybody get really excited when you're gaming? Right. Or maybe I just love music, but I'm also like a late night person. Well, my neighbors might not love that, right? Or I've been the neighbor that doesn't love that sometimes too, right? So that's where the landlord communication comes into play, because if my neighbors maybe aren't happy with my gaming at midnight, my landlord will just have a conversation with me and my team so that we can work together to modify those activities. And maybe I have a new limit on my remote control for the volume that, I'm at an 11 when it's 10 o'clock at night instead of the 21 that I had my volume controller on before, right? So this great teamwork is really all about learning new skills, great communication to make sure that I am successful in my home. Because one of these things, if the landlord isn't part of the team, and if people aren't talking to each other, then that's where problems can get real big and can get out of control 6 months later, and everyone's unhappy. So that's why this really good teamwork and communication is key. And last but absolutely not least, it's all about being in a neighborhood just like anybody else. I'm going to work, I'm going to my volunteering, I'm going to a program, I'm going to the store. I'm doing all of those things just like anybody else in the community, and I'm meeting my neighbors. So we're coming back to this. Supportive housing, kind of one of the key takeaways is to think about separating the housing and the services. So if this is a model that somebody's interested in, we have to think about what is our plan for services and what is our plan for housing. We have to think about them separately but at the same time. Does that make sense? Okay. And there's two different processes to get those in place. So these are the different adult service systems that someone might be working in. So there's the Division for Developmental Disability Services. This is where someone's on the PUNS wait list, getting selected for services. Working with your Independent Service Coordination Agency. So that's kind of the Division for Developmental Disability. Then there's the Department of Rehabilitation Services. That is another way that someone can get services. Oftentimes for folks that need support in the home with physical disabilities, they also do vocational services. And this is a whole other conversation of, if you need a deep dive into the different service divisions. That's a whole other day-long thing, but this is a snapshot, right? Then we have Medicaid for our behavioral health needs. So if I need access to mental health services or behavioral health services, Medicaid is my path to that. And then there's other waiver services that we won't get into the weeds of, but there are other waivers. And then there's natural supports or private pay. So again, these are all ways to think about how to access the supports that I might need in my home and in the community. Also just kind of making a general plug to get connected into advocacy and education that's out there connected to these different kind of state silos. The ARC of Illinois, the Centers for Independent Living, and NAMI are really wonderful, strong advocacy organizations that can help you get linked in and help you learn about these service systems. So, if we're going to focus in on the needs for folks who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, then we're going to be thinking about these kind of options for services. So the Division for Developmental Disabilities, the two kinds of services that work with supportive housing is home-based or intermittent SILA. And the fantastic thing is you're going to hear from folks after me about what it's actually like to live in supportive housing, which is fantastic. And these are some of the ways that working with an agency, you can get those services in your own home. Then you can also think about natural supports. So again, my friends, my family, my faith community, maybe a neighbor that I've built a friendship with. Those are my natural supports. And then again, private pay could potentially be an option. So those are the ways that we're thinking about services. If I have an intellectual or developmental disability and this is the system I'm working with. So now we're going to talk about getting the housing. So, sadly, there is also, you know how there's not just one easy straight door to go through to get connected to services and to get connected to all the things that you or your loved one might need? Well, unfortunately, housing also has a couple different doors. And I wish I had a different answer. And I see Jennifer smiling over there because this is what Jennifer does all the time. And she's fabulous. You're going to hear from her later. So just in the interest of transparency, it is also challenging, but we're going to walk through kind of the 3 doors that we're thinking about if we want to get access to a subsidy. So first, you're going to think about getting on the statewide referral Network. Has anybody heard of that before? Awesome. A lot of times it's like crickets, which is also fine. Both options are fine. This is a, we're all friends. This is judgment-free zone, and we're here to talk to each other and learn. So, the statewide referral network. Sorry, I'm doing a quick time check because I want to make sure there's lots of time for conversation and discussion. It is a statewide wait list for a subsidy. The statewide referral network is specifically for folks with a disability and who meet the income criteria. There is like an income limit or a maximum for the statewide referral network. Now you can get connected to the statewide referral network through an organization. I can't actually put myself on this wait list, okay? But I need to work with somebody else. There's a couple agencies that you can work with. If you already are working with a service provider agency, like Clearbrook, they can assist you in getting on the statewide referral network. AID does this as well. And these are not the only two organizations. There's quite a few that work with folks in getting on the statewide referral network. However, you also can go to your independent service coordination agency. And this, your ISC, people shorthand this, but it's Independent Service Coordination Agency. This is the agency, you might have heard like PASS agency. They're the agency that's getting you on the PUNS list. Is that all sounding? Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of heads nod, so that's excellent.
Community alternatives.
So CAU is the one for your guys' area. Thank you so much. Sometimes I forget like where their boundaries are, and I hoof it around the state, so I have to think about it. So CAU can also get you on the statewide referral network. And it's actually the state has said it's the responsibility of the ISCs to get folks on the statewide referral network if that's what they want. A lot of times you have to ask for it. And we all know that sometimes there are staffing challenges and training challenges. So someone also, your worker might say, I don't know what you're talking about. So then call me or ask to talk to a supervisor at the agency, because I've had that conversation a couple times. And it's difficult. There's a lot of turnover at the agencies. Somebody maybe missed a training and they're newer. So just know that if you are ever told, I have no idea what that is, please don't let that stop you. That's where you can call up me or ask to talk to a supervisor at the agency. Because we absolutely want to help you get through these steps. And that is a barrier that has come up before, and it might come up again. So I just like to warn people about the barriers that I have seen along the way. So the statewide referral network is, again, it's the statewide listing, but you're gonna go in there and you're gonna pick what communities you wanna live in. So the worker will sit down with me or my family, we'll talk about which cities or which townships work for me in my life. Because if I live here, do I really wanna get matched to an apartment in Champaign? Right, I mean, okay, maybe there's one person out of 1,000 that for some reason Champaign might work. But the whole point is to make sure that I'm getting matched to a unit that's in the community that I live in, where I already have my services, where I have my connections, where I have my life. And so you're selecting which communities and which cities will work. So that goes into the system. You're also going to get asked questions about any accessibility features that the unit might need to have. And so that kind of all goes in. Another thing that will come up is my household size. So if I'm applying for myself, but perhaps I need a live-in aide, a live-in support worker, then my household of one will actually need a 2-bedroom apartment, right? So those are kind of some of the things to just expect when you're looking at the statewide referral network. So that's door number one. And that's a door that you can go through anytime. So that's kind of the nice thing. You can get on the statewide referral network, you know, next week, or whenever you get an appointment with the folks that do that at your agency. So it might not be next week, but you can get on that at any point in time. The wait for the statewide referral network really varies by the community, because again, it's all about how many people picked Hoffman Estates, and then what units are available in Hoffman Estates. So there's no guarantee if it'll be 1 year or 3 years or 4 years, but we are looking at years. Just know that. All of these things, we're talking about years. And I wish I had a different or better answer. I absolutely am on team. I wish it was here for everyone tomorrow. But sadly, that is absolutely not where we are at with housing in this country and in our community. So the second door that you can go through to get access to subsidized housing is through a local public housing authority. So this will be over maybe by like the coffee table. I'll leave some of these at the end. I have a listing of all the public housing authorities kind of in the Chicagoland region, one that's for the entire state. I kind of use whichever depending on where I'm going. But to kind of shortcut that for you a little bit so you can see in the Chicagoland area, here are the websites and phone numbers for all of the local housing authorities here. So a housing authority is going to have a couple different kinds of housing. So let's say you start looking at their website. There's one kind of housing subsidy that's called a housing choice voucher. And that's where the subsidy is actually attached to me as the individual. And I just use very lay, like normal person conversation when describing these things. So just think of it this way, your housing choice voucher is attached to me as the person with the disability and as the tenant. And then along with that, I need to then work to find my apartments in the community and work with the landlord to get that voucher set up. So the voucher's paying the other part of my rent and I'm paying my 30%. And then the housing choice voucher pays the rest. But again, remember that it's attached to me, it follows me, and I go find the apartment in the community. So that's one type of voucher or subsidy, or you'll also hear people say Section 8, that you're gonna see when you're looking at public housing authority resources. Those are kind of all the words that you're gonna hear when you're looking for a subsidy. Then there's another kind of subsidy or voucher where the subsidy is actually attached to a property. And let me take one quick step back. For the statewide referral network, that's attached to a property. Okay. So again, statewide referral network, that gets you matched to very specific buildings. It's not a voucher that's going to be attached to me. So we'll jump back to our door number 2 with the Public Housing Authority. You can see a listing of all the Public Housing Authority properties generally, and you're going to go through and you might see some buildings that are for seniors only. That's very normal. But you know, if I am 25 and I'm a young adult, I am applying for subsidized housing, that is not going to be a good fit for me, right? So just be aware of these things and to not be surprised when you see them as you're looking through these resources. So just know there's going to be some properties there where it's not going to be a good fit. Because again, it might be a senior building. You might also look at the address and say, man, I don't have a way with public transportation to get from that building to my job, or it might take me 2.5 hours. And that is okay, so just know that that property isn't gonna be a good fit for me, and move on to the next one. Okay, so that way you're looking through your Public Housing Authority resources. Also know you probably cannot get on a wait list for any of these Public Housing Authority resources Monday. A lot of times the wait lists are closed. I am quite sure that the housing choice voucher waitlist is closed. That one's closed a lot. It opens up very rarely. But what I encourage you to do, even if you're just kind of toying with this and thinking about it as something you might want to consider in the next couple years, check out the website and at least start getting their email notifications. Because they'll send out notifications when these wait lists are going to open up. And the thing that really is horrible about all of this is that you have to watch for when the wait lists are going to open up. Or if you're working with an agency, Jennifer, who's nodding her head again, she's watching for these things all the time. So if you have an agency that's supporting you in this, they can help out with that. And they know when these lists are opening up. But if you're leading on this, or if you have home-based, know that it's going to take a little time. So then the last option, there's another quick type chart, is a website that you can go to yourself. However, the resources and the apartments that you're going to see at ilhousingsearch.org, that's up on the screen in front of us, those are not units where you're going to be paying 30% of your income towards your rent, okay? So, we're going to use me as an example again. I have SSI. We already know my monthly income is $750 a month. These apartments really are not going to be affordable for me in that situation because the rent is going to be higher. The rent is going to be based on the area median income, and without getting into the weeds of that, it means the rent is lower than market rate rents in your area, but it's a set rent amount. So I'm just going to use an example. This is not real. But let's say the average rent in your community is $900. Units that are a part of this, that are a low-income tax credit property, maybe the rent will be $700 instead of the market rate of $900. So it's almost like there's a light subsidy that makes the rent cheaper, but the rent is not based off of my income. The rent has nothing to do with my income in these properties, okay? So that's why it could be a great option if maybe there's a couple people, like 2 people that are gonna move in together. If I have SSDI and I'm working, or perhaps I am working full-time, but my income is below, again, what I can afford with a market rate apartment, this could be a really great option. And so you can look online and find these units anytime. You can do a search so that you're looking for units that are available today, but you can also do a search that's just for all the buildings in your community. Because that way you can check and see, if you're not looking for something, next week, you can take a look and see, you might find a building that actually could work out fantastically. Maybe they don't have any openings right now, but you can call up the property and let them know that you want to be on the wait list, you want to find out when they're going to have openings, those kind of things. So I know this is a lot. And I'm going to pass around this. I certainly do not want anyone to put their email address on here if you're not interested. Just pass it along. But at CSH, we do monthly calls. It's like a conference call where you can just call in, and if you run into a barrier, you can join the call. We do email blasts about kind of very specific Illinois-specific things. This is an email list that's not the giant CSH all-in emails that you don't care about. But this is the Illinois-specific one. So if you want to get email blasts about when we schedule these calls, or sometimes other trainings or resources that we have going on, just write your email down on here clearly if you can. And again, if you're not interested, I'm totally not offended, you can just pass it on. And I will I have 3 of them, so I will hope to get 3 of these back at the end of the day. You can pass that back. And then I'm going to put these resources for the public housing authorities on the table over there. At this point, we're going to watch one last video and just talk. So here's our upcoming schedule of our supportive housing coffee talks, is what we call them. But really, it's me on the other end of the phone. I'm just there. If no one calls in, I'm still there. And if you call in, then we chat. You know, it's very friendly. We're all very friendly. Sometimes it's no one, and sometimes there's like 7 people. And that way you can just low barrier, jump in, ask a question. If you hit a barrier, see what we can do to help solve it. So we schedule these every month, and getting on this email list will let you know when the future ones are. So that's me and my contact info, which you guys have in your packets. And then if you are interested, there's more resources. So we're going to show one last video that we put together. But we also have quite a few different resources online. So these are all of our different videos. There's a link to the one that we saw earlier. There's also 2 different digital books. So they're like ebooks and flip books that have audio with them that talk about supportive housing. And then you guys also have a copy of a toolkit in your packets. It is kind of a longer document, but don't be afraid. There's a couple tools in there. So one, it talks about if you want to join kind of a community group and work on actually getting a new building built in your community. There's resources and kind of some info about how to do that and link back in with CSH. But there's some other sections too that talk a little bit more about thinking and planning if you want to look at supportive housing in the future. So tools connected to budgeting, thinking about what skill building or support services might need to be in place. So that's actually in your packet, and thank you guys for putting that in the packet. It's really great.
Yeah, so the reason we put that packet in, and there are a lot of great ones out there, that's it. Can you hold it up for everybody to see? That's the workbook, the CSH workbook. Sorry. I talk so loud. I talk so loud, I thought for sure everybody could hear me. Sorry, thank you. So we put that in the folder because that workbook really represents whether you're just wanting to think about it and what you should be thinking about. That first 10 to 12 pages covers that kind of divides it up and things you should start looking at, looking for, and thinking about with your loved one and and their family supports and community supports. And then the second half is if you are wanting to really pursue the supportive housing, who might you want to do this with, as has been discussed this morning, as well as how might you all want to do this? So it's about advocating and researching and advocating about what's out there. So Connected Community, we do info tours once a month, and this year we've focused specifically on housing, but we've done a lot of outings, info tours to different housing models so that we could all learn what is available, what people have done some creative housing. And whether it's living on a campus site in a more sheltered community environment or living next door to mom and dad, who knows. But to give people different ideas of what is available. So as you're moving forward, do you want to work with other people? Who are those other people? And also, who do you want to talk to in your community? Who are allies who can help make a difference to create or find or save housing models that could work for your loved one and our loved ones, right? So that's one thing. So it's a great resource no matter what. As you move forward, don't be intimidated, just read it. You don't have to do anything if you're not ready. And then also in our resource list, under supportive housing, everything that Julie talked about, I have the link in that supportive housing section for you. So again, when you're comfortable, we can just go ahead and look at those and you'll get a better idea of specifically what she's talking about and where those websites are.
Awesome. And these handouts that I'm going to put on the table back there, they're also going to go out electronically. So again, because there probably isn't enough for everybody. I also, in my experience, find that, you're hearing about it, you might not want to move forward with this particular model. That's also fine and wonderful. I just don't bring paper enough for every single person usually because then it will just get wasted. So if you want one, totally grab one. It's going to go out electronically.
I think we changed our mind, we're not showing this video. Ask the questions you want.
Hi, my name is Phyllis Kinch. I'm the mother of Tom Sadowitz. And Hi, my name is Phyllis Kinch. I'm the mother of Tom Sadowitz. And we've adopted Tom when he was 8 years old. Now he's 41. And he's been the apple of my eye, and he's my sunshine and the star. And I just love him to bits. And this is my husband, Frank. And we've been married 5 years, so he's kind of been brought into the game. We found this place, which is close. And we also gave him the option of moving to Bourbonnais, not with us, but near us, because we knew he had to be eventually on his own. So he chose to stay here. He has a personal support worker, which makes it very easy on us.
Tom does a great job actually living on his own. However, there are some times he does need a little bit of help with making sure he stays on budget. Sometimes he needs reminders, cleaning his house. He likes to have a companion, he likes to have somebody to talk to, so I try to come in and have like topics ready for us to discuss, like lots of debates. I take him out in the community too.
I don't know, I just want people to know that I do have autism, but I don't get that, let that get in the way of what I want to do. I don't let anything get in my way.
Tom wants to act. He eats, sleeps, drinks, dreams constantly, as you can see by all his posters and inspirational plaques. And I would hope that his dream would come true. I would like him to actually be able to possibly work with someone who sees his drive and his ambition and how he can focus when he's in front of a camera. My dream is that someone will recognize in him that he can do it.
Trying to learn more about autism so I can help Tom more. I realized that when we married her that this was going to be a little challenging.
My biggest thing that I want for Tom is happiness, health, and safety. And I'm afraid that when I'm gone, there's not going to be someone there besides his personal support worker who gives him 15 hours a week to basically really worry about him. I don't feel that there's anyone in the family that I could count on that much to help him with the day-to-day. I'm proud that he's doing as well as he is, and most people that I say, you know, my son is autistic and he's living on his own, they're like, what? You gotta be kidding, and he drives, you know? But I think he's done really well. And, sometimes I wish he was closer to us, just so that I could introduce him to the things that are out there that I feel being in Bourbonnais, it's a smaller area, smaller county. There's more things that I think more trusting things out there than there are here. So that's why sometimes I wish he was with not with us, but yes. I think he's done a real good job. I'm proud of him.
We're going to open it up for questions for Julie. So, of course it's way in the back. I think since they wrapped, these questions should be wrapped, okay? So if you can wrap your question, that would be great. We'll give her a beat?
Yeah.
Okay.
So going back to the individuals that get subsidies, are there major issues or a percentage where you lose a subsidy and then what happens?
So that is a great question. And, sorry, yes. So the question was about with the subsidy, and then what can happen if you lose it, or possibly like how you avoid it. Does that kind of capture your question? So, yes, that is a fantastic question. Through supports, the goal is to make sure that someone does not lose the subsidy. And sometimes agencies will work with someone if it's a matter of a specific landlord to actually move and end the relationship with one landlord and move into a different property, because we really do want to avoid at all costs actually losing the subsidy. It's much easier to find a new landlord and find a new apartment than to actually lose the subsidy, because that can also create problems in trying to get one back. And it's all around better to ensure that, you know, we're looking at, do we need to increase the supports and services? Is there a gap there? Like, to really identify what is the barrier, what is the challenge, and then look at what do I need to do to solve that gap, fill that gap, to make sure that we're resolving whatever the problem or challenge is. And yeah.
I think the other part is that pipeline of that subsidy at risk to go away. So now, you know, providing all these other pieces are in place. Are you finding issues when someone has a subsidy, if everything continues?
And if everything continues and they're doing well, or the property owner, the landlord doesn't change his or her arrangement, is there funding subsidy issues, I guess? Thanks.
So there always could, I mean, there could be. We actually haven't seen a decrease. There have been more vouchers going into the system, more subsidies, than coming out. But I also, you know, it's coming from the feds, right? HUD, like Housing and Urban Development, is the primary source of funding. Even if I'm accessing these subsidies in different places, most of the funding will come from the federal government. For some of the buildings too, they're funded through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. And so if I'm in an affordable housing, if I have a subsidy that's in one of these buildings, or if I'm in supportive housing where the subsidy is attached to the property, that actually, those properties have long-term deals, projects, packages that ensure that the property has a long-term budget to ensure affordability in the long term, and that the building is maintained. Because one of the things that used to happen is that a building would go up, but then there was no budget for the maintenance of it. And we all know that that is a recipe for like a disaster, right? You cannot just put a building up and never do anything to it ever again. That is not going to work, and it's not going to be safe. So properties now have these long-term budgets, and that's built into it. The other side of your question is that if I have a housing choice voucher where the subsidy is attached to me as a person, then yeah, I would be in the same position as any other renter in the community. If my landlord sold the property, if there was any kind of change there, where the landlord just isn't going to be taking that voucher anymore. So yeah, that's a great question.
We have a question right here.
I have a perspective from a landlord and also a person that has a son with a disability. I would say that several years ago I was approached by some folks with disabilities that wanted to move into my building, and their social skills were such that I was totally scared, shocked, and dismayed over what kind of tenants these folks were going to be. And not knowing what I know today, it was I really didn't want anything to do with renting to someone that had an intellectual disability. So my thought or my suggestion would be that always advocate. These people were trying to be independent. They were legally blind. One was legally blind, but their social skills were terrible, and I was scared. So I think that when you're looking down this path, you want to look at everybody's perspective as to what they have to offer. In retrospect, I attempted to open my building up to people with disabilities through several different agencies, and I was never given that opportunity to do that, which I think is very disappointing also. So my suggestion would be continue to advocate for your loved one in their role to be independent, but I think that in order to get them started, you want to have someone there to approach the whole situation so that you don't turn somebody off, so that they have a better understanding of what's going on. Because I think these people, once you do get that understanding, which I gained several years later, you have a fantastic tenant that is going to be there long term, that's going to be generally low maintenance, and maybe someone that landlords really want, but you got to get past that first step, past that first door, through that first hallway, through whatever. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that, and also thank you, I think, you know, when you have opportunities to talk to other landlords, to share your personal experience, that also makes all the difference when you are talking to other landlords and property owners in the community. Because, yeah, you make a great point, and we see that all the time when we're working with scattered site properties.
We have time for one more question, Julie.
Hi. I'm a little confused about the kind of housing. For option door number 3, we have home-based funding, and I hear that there's a long wait for SILA-based funding. So if I could, you know, roll that into, so my question is, does the building have to be a government-built building? Or like this gentleman said back here, can it be a landlord that owns a 8-unit building and you could rent one of those and get lower rent using door number 3?
So door number 3 is with specific properties. They're
Based on who decides the property gets on the list?
So these properties they're called low-income housing tax credit properties. They get funding from the Illinois Housing Development Authority, and sorry, that's so many like acronyms. Sorry, but when the building was built, part of their funding package to be affordable housing is that they get dollars from IDA, they get other kinds of loans to ensure that this particular building has affordable housing in it. A lot of times it will be mixed income. So some of the units in the building might be full market rent. Maybe another couple will be this lower rent, like an affordable apartment. And then some of the other units in the building might actually have a deeper subsidy. They might actually be part of the statewide referral network. They might have a deeper subsidy from some of these other programs. But a lot of times in door number 3, for lack of a better word, it's a mixed property.
That does answer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Let's give a warm thank you to Julie.